is a beautiful summer morning here north of Paris, Ontario, and we are in a 1970 MGB. In my opinion, this is the definitive small classic sports car. They sold so many of these for so long, it seems like everyone has a story with an MGB. They used to own one, they rode in one, or maybe they own one right now. But let's start the engine up, let's go for a drive and talk about why this car is so enduring, how it became such a classic. All right, I'm donning the shades because it is beautiful out. Pulling onto the road in the MGB. Listen to that. A classic sports car sound if there ever was one. I love the MGB. I have driven different versions of this car different times. I've road tripped a few, I've autocrossed these. Just like a lot of other people, I have a lot of seat time in various MGBs because they were around. They made a lot of these for a long time, but let's go back to the beginning. Basically, MG was one of the first major sports car brands to enter the American market. The classic story is that during World War II, young men went into Europe and they found an interest in these funny, small, little sports cars, which were so different than what American cars were at the time. And they brought a few of them home, and they brought their interest for those cars home as well. So MG had been selling TDs and TFs, and eventually the MGA, which was their offering up until 1962. As you may presume, this MGB was designed to replace the MGA. And with this new car, they brought in a lot of innovations. Now, where the 1950s MGA was a body-on-frame with a heavy ladder chassis, then a body kind of bolted to that, the MGB was a unibody, and in 1962, when this car debuted, that was pretty innovative. Not a lot of cars had that. Of course, the math to create a unibody is really complicated. This is before computers, so when they were trying to figure out how to make a unibody car, they just kind of made it really tough. They overbuilt it because the math, they didn't really kind of know what to do, so they just made it really stout. And this really strong and, for the time, very rigid unibody is one of the defining characteristics of the car. They overdid it on its structural rigidity, which is part of the reason why this car drives very well. So let me show you the other innovation for the time. This is it. The windows roll up and down. I'm not kidding. In the time, the early 1960s, British sports cars didn't have windows. They did not have outside door handles. They had these like little clip-in tent things for windows, and the idea of a roll-up window was innovative and a luxury feature. And so to bring the MGB into then modern times, every single one had roll-up windows. I know, the luxury of it all. Elsewhere in the design, well, the MGB was a lot more, shall I say, classic. Let's start with the engine. It's called the B Series. It's a 1.8 liter four-cylinder, and it has production history going back to 1953 with a design that can be traced back to 1947. So this is a 1970 model year car, so by the time this car was brand new, that engine was kind of already an antique. And there's nothing fancy about this engine. It's an iron block, iron head. It's carbureted, of course. And it is just kind of a basic engine. Now, an interesting thing about this engine is that it has a narrow bore and a long stroke, which is the opposite of what most performance engines are. The reason is because back in the 1950s, the tax brackets in England for car registration and road tax were based on the bore size multiplied by the cylinder count, and they ignored stroke. So obviously, to get a bigger engine in a lower tax bracket, manufacturers made cars with narrow bores and long strokes, which made engines that are they lend themselves well to torque, but they also don't rev very high, and they also are known to kind of vibrate a little bit because they have this long stroke. Anyways, the B Series engine, they made it in a bunch of different versions, but for the MGB, it was always a 1.8. Earlier cars like this have twin carburetors, Later emissions models have a single carburetor. Takes a bit over 90 horsepower. Listen to it go. MGBs were never particularly fast. They were sporty and they were fine for the time, but we're talking 0 to 60 in like the 12-second range and like a deep 18-second quarter mile. They would eventually go to a top speed of over 100 miles an hour, but they were not straight line burner cars. And now that we're doing a bit, closer to highway speeds, we can talk about the transmission. We're doing 3,500 RPM right now, and that's because these cars are geared very low. Because they're not naturally gifted with a lot of horsepower, you can make that up with a mechanical advantage of leverage to make the acceleration a little bit sharper. The downside is that on the highway, the engine's going to be spinning a little faster than you'd like. And a second. So to get the sprightly acceleration, relatively, and a decent highway gear, the MGB offered an optional overdrive, and it basically was a little switch on the dash, and you'd click it, and it would drop the revolutions by about 20%, and you could operate it in third gear and fourth gear. It was an extra cost option, and only about 15 or 20% of MGBs had it. This car does not. And so that means that today, an overdrive MGB, or one equipped with the overdrive gearbox, is worth a good premium more than a standard one without. You can drive an MGB on the highway with or without overdrive, but certainly if you're going to take long trips in one on the highway, you're going to want that overdrive just because this engine is spinning very fast to do what we would consider pretty normal speeds today. Almost every MGB came with a 4-speed manual. There was nominally a 3-speed automatic offered. They're pretty rare. You're not likely to find one. Almost every single one had a 4-speed manual. Cars up to 1967 or 68, mid-year change, had a non-synchro first gear, and later cars like this 1970 model have a fully synchronized 4-speed box. How modern! Underneath, the suspension, again, was very, very basic. It's AA-arm front, borrowed from the Y-type saloon or sedan for us. Just passenger car stuff. Out back, you of course have a live axle with leaf springs. Nothing crazy about the suspension at all. But I will say this, as I'm driving it on these beautiful Ontario roads, you might look at the basic spec of this car. 90 horsepower, live axle, nothing really crazy about it on paper. But despite having this basic design, this basic suspension, despite being considered outdated, this car was new in 1970, the MGB is more than the sum of its parts. It always has. These cars, despite having no logical reason to be this good at handling, are just delightful in the corners, because one of the few things it has that is actually advanced at the time is rack and pinion steering, which means the turn-in is so direct, even on these old-timey tires. It's a joy to drive an MGB. Everything that you interact with feels purposeful. The steering wheel is enormous, but it's still pretty stiff, and there's none of that dead on-center steering you get from a lot of classic cars. American cars typically, the center of the wheel, you can just kind of do this, nothing happens. There's actually reaction right from the center, which is not typical in a classic car. The gear shift is a delight. It's direct. You always know what gear you're in. The engine makes a charming little noise. Every part of driving the MGB feels fun. This car just works. It excels despite its basic mechanicals. I mean, it's just like, it's such a joy to drive this car. You can corner it hard, run it through the gears, listen to that engine go, breathing through those twin carbs. I love driving classic cars like this MGB, and I hope that you enjoy watching videos about them. If you want to help me make more videos like this one, please do hit the subscribe button, comment, all that good stuff. It does help me make more videos like this. And if you have a car that you'd like to see featured on the channel, please reach out to me at classiccarsandclayton@gmail.com. Now back to this review. So if you think the driving experience is basic, the interior is kind of a reflection of that. There are anachronisms even for a car from 1970, like this chrome map light. That's stuff that like American cars stopped doing in like the 50s. There's these archaic little knobs for your climate control. I have no idea how they work. This is a 1970, which means it's like the post-federalized version. The very earliest examples of government safety stuff are coming in. So we have a padded dashboard. We have this kind of recessed gauge panel. The gauges are in here. We actually have an air pump still under the hood of this car, which was an early emissions device. But the inside of this car, people always think that MGBs are so tiny that they're not going to fit in them. They're actually pretty good. I would say that the passenger compartment is longer than it is wide. They are pretty accommodating for legs and for height, but they're not so roomy on the width department. Oh, it's just so fun to drive though. That said, once you're in the MGB, the ergonomics are perfect. The wheel's a little close to me, but I kind of want that considering how heavy the wheel is. It's just a great car to drive. You hear that click of the shifter? How can you not like it? It is easy for me to see why the Mazda MX-5, a car that basically takes this concept and modernized it, is such a hit. Because of course people wanted to have this driving experience, but they didn't want to put up with all the annoying stuff like the basic climate controls and the reliability, carburetors, all that. I get it. So now I'll answer the question, do you want an MGB? I think you do. I think you do. Because they made so many of these for such a long time, the barrier to entry to these cars is very low. These are still very affordable cars for the classic car space. There's so many. You can probably find a couple for sale online right now. And not only that, because they're so beloved, because so many people care about these cars and drive them and restore them today, the knowledge about them is online as well. How to repair them, how to get parts, how to drive them. All that stuff is available. If you want a classic sports car, there could hardly be a better place to start. And it's also a very versatile car. With the overdrive, you could road trip these, you could autocross them. Heck, you could even take one of these on a track day. You wouldn't be that embarrassing. They are a lot of fun to drive. So if you're looking to dip your toe in the world of classic sports cars, I do recommend the MGB. Now it's also worth noting that they made a couple different variants of the MGB. They sold it in coupe and convertible form with a 4, 6, and 8-cylinder engine, various permutations. However, the one you see right here, open top, 4-cylinder, 4-speed, this is the most common configuration. This is how you're most likely to find an MGB. If you have the cash, go for a chrome bumper car with the overdrive. But if you're trying to stick to a budget, the later impact bumper cars, they're not as spunky. They have a single carburetor instead of two. They have a raised ride height. They have these controversial rubber bumpers front and rear. People do and don't like them, but you can't argue that they offer a very affordable entry into the world of classic sports cars. And in general, an MGB is just plain fun. So I like the MGB. I am a fan of this car. They're not perfect. They do have some faults and foibles. Honestly, the top is hilarious. A folding top was actually an option, and the standard one that this car would have had was more like a tent you had to construct. You would like put poles on and make this frame and then stretch the canvas over it. It was a hilarious affair. I'm not surprised that this one does not have it in the trunk at all. They are dubious in terms of weather sealing and cold weather comfort and all those things. The MGB does have faults. They're also, because of that unibody structure, rust problems are very complicated and costly to fix. Most of these cars that have had rust repair done, it's not good rust repair because the value of the cars doesn't make it make sense. So they do have some issues. However, across the 18-year production run from 1962 to 1980, MG would go on to sell over 500,000 MGB variants, if you include all of them, the coupe, the convertible, the 6, the 8, all of them. Over 500,000, and it was, by a long shot, the most popular MG model of all time. There's a reason why these cars are so popular. And if you are like me, sometimes I get a little in my own head and think, these cars are too common. They're everywhere. Everyone has an MGB. And it's true, like you will never have the only one at the car show if you have an MGB. But there's two important things. You will have had a fabulous time driving to the car show, and you'll be having, in my opinion, one of the definitive car lover experiences. I think that everyone who loves cars, loves driving, you owe it to yourself to drive an MGB. Like a Beetle, like a Model T, an MGB to me is a touchstone car. You absolutely have to try one to understand the automotive landscape at the time. So that's my review of the 1970 MGB. If you want to see a review of another classic sports car, check out my review of the 1987 Alfa Romeo Spider. But now, I'm going to get back to driving. Thanks for watching. Came in a little hot.